What up?
What's going on?
Living the dream.
Always.
What I was telling Steve just now is I have this. I finally got around to framing this Dome Patrol poster here, which it's a really an awkward size. It took me forever to find a frame, and I actually had to cut the mat out of the side so it would fit, so it didn't say Dome Patrol. But now I can't figure out where to put it. So it will be back there eventually. I just haven't figured out where. So if you have any suggestions, throw them in the comments.
I thought that was it's a great poster, awesome giveaway. But man, for the folks to get that home from the stadium, I can just imagine wasn't so easy.
I maybe like 7% of all the ones that like people like, and I'm sure a lot of people wanted to keep them, and they just how do you protect that throughout the course of a 3-hour football game? Like, where do you put it? Like, I guess you could roll it up and maybe put in your bag, but like it was a strange thing. And they like laid them over the seats, and then they got turned into paper airplanes by the Ravens.
I was gonna say, yeah, that was the awful. Was that Baltimore Ravens game, right?
Yes,
Monday night.
Yeah, it was a bad game. Anyway, but so this is one that we got. Like they gave the media them at the facility a couple days beforehand, so we could send pictures of them and stuff. And so that's what that is. But
I should have taken advantage and grabbed more. I only had two, and one's in my son's room, and one went to a relative, and now I had like a bunch of people asking for them afterwards. And I guess I could ask the Saints, but yeah, there wasn't a pile stack left at the media room afterwards.
They're gone to the game. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
Not my job.
Picked up one of the airplanes.
Anyway, so yeah, so before we get going here, we are doing this a little differently than we have previously in that we are only doing a mailbag segment here. We did record this episode is going to post tomorrow. We had some info from Archie Manning that we got to talk to him earlier in the week. He talked to us about Derek Carr. We also have an interview with Eric Eager, the VP of Research and Development at Zoomer Sports, formerly at PFF. And so that'll be in the episode tomorrow. But I figured rather than try to kind of finagle this around it, we're just going to do the one live chat with the mailbag. So if you have questions or comments, throw them in there now. I can see we have some comments flowing in already, and we'll just get to them as we go. We're going to vamp here for a couple minutes just to kind of let the questions accumulate, or the takes, or whatever you want it to be. Maybe your favorite ice cream cone or your favorite breed of dog. I don't know.
Folks might be too into the Masters right now. We might be in trouble.
That is true. I was watching that this morning. Tiger looks old, man.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's had a ton of surgeries, obviously, too, and is hurt.
Terrible car accidents.
Right. And what's he up? I think 47 now?
Yeah, 47. He can still crush the ball. Every now and then I'm like, oh, I want to get back into golf, because I played a lot of golf when I lived up in South Carolina, because there's a golf course every 10 feet. And I have not played at all when I've been down here. And then I'll watch like the Masters and be like, it's not even worth it, because I'm never going to even be able to hit the ball straight, let alone like do anything fun.
Yeah, well, we could definitely go out there and just have a few cold ones.
Yeah,
and enjoy.
To me, it is a drinking event.
Absolutely,
more so than a competitive event.
Yeah, I will not let my ineptitude frustrate me with the game, even though it can be, you get that one perfect swing and you think you got it, and then the next one you end up shanking, kind of thing. But it's a frustrating sport. But
I'm a 9-hole guy.
Okay, good.
Even when I was playing a lot, I found that like I can get through 9 holes and usually play pretty consistently, and I can drive the ball pretty well when I'm feeling it. But once I make that turn, it goes. Like I can feel it. I'm just like, I'm tired. I'm not swinging it right, and then I just get mad. My ineptitude does make me upset. And then by the 10th hole, I'm usually kind of drunk, and then that's not good for like. There's a level of buzzed you want to be, and then you get to the point where you're just like, this is not fun anymore.
Yeah, when you're in the cart, it's different. But if you're walking it, definitely, it's like, I'm ready to go back to the clubhouse.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. But all right, and yeah, I've lost like a majority of my balls.
And that's another thing. Those aren't cheap, obviously. Unless you start getting like the shitty range balls out there.
Yeah, I have this like weird thing where it's like if there's no water in front of me, I can hit a perfect shot. But it could be like a puddle. It doesn't even have to be a threat. If I see the water in front of me, I'm gonna hit it in there at least once. It's so weird. Like if there was a way that I could get like goggles that would just erase the water and make it look like a pool of bubble gum, it wouldn't bother me at all. I would just hit the ball and I'd be fine. But the second I see water, it's like a magnet. Anyway, okay.
We're gonna have to get like that special Luke Skywalker blast shield in front of you while he's training with the lightsaber.
Yes. I probably would be better that way. But all right. If anyone's wondering why I have a haircut, it's because I'm getting married a week from Friday. And so and I'm not mentioning this to get congratulations, although feel free to say that. I'm just saying the next couple episodes. So Tuesday's episode should be normal. That shouldn't be an issue. But then the next two after that, there might be some scheduling difficulties, or, we're going to have to figure it out. But so if just saying in advance, if there are issues, bring it up to your manager. I don't know. Like, have your people get in touch with my people, and my people will send you an out of office email and we'll get back to you. Anyway, so just keep that in mind. Yeah. Any updates for you, Steve? Any life events coming up?
Nothing too exciting going on. Just we're counting down. I see Jerry Poor put up there 3 weeks until the NFL draft. That's about the excitement in my life right now. Sorry, Jeff.
I'm dreading the NFL draft. It is the most exhausting 3-day period of the NFL calendar.
It is, but then guess what? Afterwards, our reward is the Jazz Fest weekend we get to attend. And that's
there's at least exciting stuff to talk about. I say that mostly in jest of like, we spent the last month and a half just talking about the same 6 topics in different ways, right? Like, the offseason can get very monotonous, and the draft at least gives you new things to mine, right? Like new players to talk about and new tape to watch, and stuff to complain about. Like, why didn't they take this guy? Why'd they take another guard? And that's at least interesting.
Yeah, and then we'll have obviously rookie mini camp, and soon enough OTAs. I see that smile breaking through, and then there you go. We're back in season mode.
I enjoy OTAs. I like OTAs a lot better than training camp.
Oh, I agree totally.
Training camp, I mean, like, for the fans who go out there, I'm sure they have a great time, and I've always felt like that's such a fun atmosphere. It's always fun for me for like the first week. And then it gets very monotonous. It's very hot. Although I do have to say, like, the Saints were much better to us this year in terms of like having like a cooling tank. Because that is me. I sweat a lot. Anyone who's been around me during a hot event will be able to say this. Like, I sweat kind of weirdly a lot. Like, I probably have like a gland issue. I don't know. But like, so for me personally, that cooling tent was a lifesaver.
I got to say that, big shout out to, I got to say Dennis Allen for that, because we've never had that with Sean Payton around.
Yeah, and Corporate Realty, I think, sponsored it. So I want to give them credit too. But yeah, well, I think Sean Payton was very much trying to break us, right? Like, like, I think he would be the first to tell you it was intentional. Like, he did his press conferences outside after practice, and he knew that if we were exhausted, we just wouldn't have the energy to ask him difficult questions. And Dennis Allen went the other direction of like, he gave us a cooling tent. He does all the interviews inside in the air conditioning. And I think, maybe he learned his lesson, because maybe this year he will try to break our spirit, just like Sean did all those years.
Yeah, Sean didn't want anybody in the press room relaxing, getting comfortable, and coming up with anything that they might not have on the top of their list for them to ask. So outside in the heat, it didn't matter for him. And man, there were even those rainstorms too. It was like, can we like head inside here? And it was like, you still got the weather conditions still to deal with there. And that's, just some of the fun of training camp. But man, I don't know. You do end up missing it. Like right now, I'm thinking about it, and I can't wait to get back to the Saints facility. But after a week into it, you're like, oh, here we are, another morning. Great, taking attendance.
One of the things I enjoyed the most about the offseason is actually the rookie mini camp. Because it's just one day that we're out there, and we just get to talk to all the rookies who are just really excited to talk to us, as opposed to like some of the veterans who are just like, oh, these guys again, and you get a lot of information. Like, I think I got more out of that rookie mini camp than I got out of any of the OTA sessions. just because like it's all the like it's only the rookies. Like they're the only ones you're going to talk to, and you're going to get a lot of information that you've been wondering about. And so I don't think the date for that is set yet. I think it's usually within 10 days of the draft, I think, or something like that. Like they have to decide when it's going to be. So that's something I'm looking forward to for sure. But all right, I think we've vamped long enough. We have some questions in there.
Quick note about last year's minicamp. That one of the standouts. Obviously, we didn't see any of the workouts or what they were doing, kind of thing. But talking to the players, man, Alontae Taylor immediately stood out as a guy who had confidence and just sounded like a leader.
Yeah, like I think our initial impression of Alontae was very much real. Of like, I think everyone came away from that being like, "Wow, that guy's impressive." You very quickly understand why they were drawn to him in the draft, and then you see him on the field and you see the confidence he plays with, and
you're like, "Oh,
that was not a mirage." And so, yeah, I think that's a good example of like, it's your first real exposure to a lot of these players outside of kind of the draft interviews and any like press conferences they might do on draft night. So yeah, I think it's a good point. But all right, I think we've vamped long enough, and we have some questions in there that we can use to get started. If you have questions throughout this entire process, drop them in there, and we'll just try to get to as many as possible. We're going to try to go for about 15, 20 minutes. We always end up doing longer than that, but in this case, I do need to get this edited, and I have something I got to be at later tonight. So let's get this going. But and just to be clear, this is the third segment of the podcast. So I'm going to say we're back. Don't get confused. There was nothing before this that you missed. It's just the awkward nature of a raw podcast on YouTube. You ready, Steve?
I am ready. And I promise not to say Brett Favre.
Yeah. So I'm also going to like reference back to Eric Eager because we have already done that. And one thing you should know is that Steve is incapable of saying Aaron Rodgers. He always says Brett Favre. It's ridiculous.
It really is.
He said it during our interview with Eric Eager, and I was like, Steve, you're confusing the hell out of this guy. He doesn't even understand what you're asking him because you just referenced the quarterback that has been retired for how many years?
Yeah, it's been at least 12? It's at least 4 or 5 times now, so it's not even like, oh, a mistake. It's just programmed.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Did that work? Was it good? Okay.
You can't see me?
Oh, you froze as you did that. That was funny. All right. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. One more segment to go. Thanks again to Eric Eager for joining us. I thought that was a really good interview. He broke down a lot of what we're going to be looking at in the draft. Make sure to check out his stuff over at Sumer Sports. He does a regular podcast with Thomas Dimitroff, former Falcons GM. It's really good. They do a really good job. So make sure to check that out. But yes, so final segment, we are going to get into a live mailbag. We've been letting the questions kind of pile up, and we're going to go through them. And so, Steve, first question.
Hit me.
Why don't you ever open the blinds?
I feel like the sun would be like kind of wash it out.
There's your answer, because it would look awful.
Yeah, right.
You can close them. I said so I wanted to ask a question, but then I remembered that I didn't come up with a question, so I just asked the first thing I saw. Anyway, so we are going to get into questions right off the bat here. And we got Jerry G. Pore Jr. always here, always talking. We are 3 weeks away from the NFL draft. What do you think the 29th pick will be for the Saints, linebacker or defensive end or defensive tackle? If those are my 3 options, I'm going to eliminate linebacker right out front because first, I don't think that it's necessarily a position of great need for you, so you're not going to tilt. Second, the Saints just don't draft linebackers in the first round. They haven't taken a first-round linebacker since Stephon Anthony. And I don't think this class of linebackers has anyone that you're really like falling over for to pick. So I just don't see it. Defensive end, maybe. I think defensive line in general is a potential place you're going to mine. I still think, I keep coming back to Osiris Torrance. If he's there, I'm taking him. But, there are options. There are options. And I think you're either going interior line or defensive line. And one way or another, that's what you're going to see. But a guy like Mozzie Smith, a guy like Brian Brzee, these are all options on the table, I think.
Yeah, I definitely like the notion of going D-line. inside at tackle definitely would be my first preference, but I still think, addressing that end, I could see that happening for this team. Obviously, they've done it in the past. We've seen, a Davenport, a Peyton Turner, and maybe this time they could strike gold on a first rounder at that end position, because it hasn't been good lately. I mean, obviously, though, you have I guess you could say, gold standard of defensive ends with Cam Jordan with that pick, but after that, hasn't been so fortunate for them. But
yeah, and I mean, go ahead.
No, I was going to say one of the positions I was kind of surprised Eric Eager brought up was wide receiver, and that was still really high on his list. And I do think it is a need, but it wasn't as such a priority, I guess, in my mind.
I think this is going to be the year that you really start to gauge how much value the Dennis Allen regime is going to put on wide receiver in the draft. Last year, it was no question you really needed to get a blue chip wide receiver in the building. But under Sean Payton, you really didn't do that often. You drafted Brandon Cooks, you drafted Michael Thomas in the second round, but beyond that, you did not spend a lot of top end assets at the wide receiver position. I think Dante Stallworth might have been the only other first round pick since Mickey Loomis, in terms of a wide receiver pick.
Oh, so, but I think
you're right, Robert Meacham. That's another one. Good catch. But I do think this is a year where you're going to see that. If they spend a second rounder or a third rounder, I'd be surprised if it's a first rounder. But Zay Flowers, I think, is an intriguing guy. I've seen him mocked there a few times. Maybe a Josh Downs. Maybe that is something that we just don't know. Is now that you have a defensive head coach, does he err toward the side of, okay, we're going to use our top end assets on the offense because I know that I can mine the defensive side of the ball and develop the defensive side of the ball, whereas Sean Payton in the past was more toward the opposite, where he knew he could find wide receivers. He was happy with the wide receiver room, even though it all he had was Traquan Smith, Marquez Callaway, and Deontay Hardy in there. Anyway.
A thing Eager too, and maybe it is because of that defensive now mindset, high on his list too, corner.
Yeah, I think corner's high on everybody's list every year. It's such an important position that it can never be low on your list, even if you feel like you have enough. Like, even look at last year, the Saints, I felt like, had a great wide cornerback room that had a ton of depth in 4 starting cornerbacks in half the season. That they were ended up like throwing Chris Harris out there for meaningful snaps. So
right, and people were mad with the Alontae Taylor pick. It was like, oh, we're drafting this guy, a special teamer, so high.
Can you imagine if they didn't have him? Like, can you imagine if they didn't take that pick, where they would have been from a defensive back standpoint midway through the season? Obviously, trading CJ Gardner-Johnson did limit that, but
yeah, for sure. I'm curious though, with that corner pick, is it going to be something that they'd be willing to address, I guess, early on if something did fall to them in round 1?
I don't think so. I think a guy like Corey Trice is interesting out of Purdue. He's 6'3", big dude. They also have apparently had CJ Johnson in for a visit, which I did appreciate because it's just one name away from CJ Gardner-Johnson. But
they could give him the same jersey too.
Yeah, he could wear 22. I don't think. No, Mark Ingram's not on the roster anymore, so he could wear 22.
Mark's still floating around out there. Yeah.
Got Rachel Cusimano, and hope I'm saying that right, in the building. She says, "Great haircut. Thank you. I appreciate that." Rachel it's worth mentioning, also gave us a great review on Apple Podcasts. So if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, I haven't left a review on Apple Podcasts, maybe go do that. It's really, I do appreciate it. And I remember, and when you comment again, I'll bring it up. So, hey, thanks, Rachel. I appreciate that.
Definitely appreciate it, Rach.
Okay. Austin Kloska, another common commenter, says, do we see the Saints staying at 29 or moving up for the right price? And I mean, I think this is a year where I'd really like to see the Saints stay at 29. I do not want to see them spend more to go up and get a guy who would be there at 29. If you're not going up for a quarterback or like a premium position, it's really difficult for me to sign off on that when you have already given away so many assets throughout the course of the last few drafts. That said, I can see it happening. I mean, it's hard. You can't bet against it, right? As much as I wouldn't like to see it, like, for example, if Osiris Torrance, like we've talked about this, I think Osiris Torrance is the only first round guard. And if you want him desperately and you feel like that is a position of need and you just don't want to go into the season having to bank on Andres Pete being available for 17 games, which is a bad bet, and you can say, man, he's going to go at 26. We need to get up to 25. Fine. But I think it's way more likely that happens at 40, where you get into day 2 and you're like, no, this guy's not going to get to us at 40, but we really want him. And maybe you trade up in the second round or from 71 into the second. Like, I think the day 2 picks are much more likely for you to see the Saints move around because the cost is less and the margin is narrower, where there's just not as many people you might be confident in. And you just want to go make sure you get a guy that you have done your due diligence on and you have a good feeling about. So to me, I think it's more likely that you stay at 29 and you make something happen in the second or third round.
In my video game brain, playing Madden football, I would love to see this team trade down, accumulate more picks kind of thing. Maybe somebody gets desperate enough where they want to trade into that 29 spot to draft Hendon Hooker because they want that 5th-year quarterback option and might be willing to deal with you like a Seattle Seahawks, I would say, might be interested to move up and you could get more assets out of it. But this team, we don't see them do that. If anything, they see something they want and move up to go after it. So it's hard to really obviously predict, because if that scenario comes up in 3 weeks, the Saints are going to make their move again to get their guy. I don't doubt that at all.
Yeah, and I mean, the Eagles are a good example of a team that does that all the time, is trade back, accumulate more assets, and then make the picks, and they've done a really good job with it. But it doesn't always work out, right? Like, if you are trading down and what ends up happening is you take a guy who you don't have a high grade on, or you might have some question marks about because you've already missed the guys that you did have a good grade on and you did have a lot of confidence in, then that's something I don't like. Whereas, like, for example, the Giants, you could have looked at that trade after the draft when they traded down with the Bears. The Bears went and got Justin Fields, and the Giants got a future first-round pick and then drafted a guy who had a ton of talent in Kadarius Toney, right? And you're like, man, what a boondoggle. Whatever you want to say. What a haul for the Giants. And then look, 2 years later, Kadarius Toney is winning a Super Bowl with the Chiefs. So, it doesn't always work out that way, but I would like to see the Saints be more amenable to it, like, especially as it pertains to like accumulating mid-round draft picks. I want to see them draft in the mid-rounds more often because they've been so good at it.
Yeah,
but they end up trading them away.
Yeah, they've definitely been big hits. I feel like more with those later round guys, those mid-round to later round guys than those first-round picks. So you could argue that they might be better off accumulating more of those later assets.
Yeah, it's Poppy 504 says we go on wide receiver Hyatt. I think it's an interesting option. I do wonder how much of it is tied to Hendon Hooker. Like, if the Saints end up drafting Hendon Hooker in like the 3rd round and then they get to the 4th round and like, we do kind of want another wide receiver, and this is a guy who they have a very good rapport with. I think we talked about this in a previous podcast in one of our mock drafts where the Seahawks took CJ Stroud at number 2, and then at number 12 they ended up taking Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I think what's going to happen is teams see the success that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have had, and they start trying to do that more often, is bring in that really, really effective wide receiver that has found so much success with that quarterback and pair them together, because the speed at which Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow started playing at an all-pro level as far as a duo is remarkable. And I can't think of another corollary of like two guys who found that much success in college and then immediately reproduced that in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, they brought the gritty, I feel like, to the NFL, and it still continues on, which is
he's not even the gritty guy.
It's just amazing how that trend just continues as well in sports. But with Hyatt, I don't know. Obviously, a burner, speed guy, not fitting that mold of the contested catch want that this team has made it clear that they're looking for. But, you know, I wouldn't be opposed to obviously another deep threat down the field because they have a guy in Rashid Shaheed right now. But yeah, this is year 2 for him. So we still don't know how exactly they're going to work him into the offense this year.
Yeah, and I do think it would be a bit redundant in terms of from a skill set. Here, hold on. My dog is barking. Give me a second.
I hear him. He's like, Jeff, it's time to let me out.
No, he's barking at someone outside, which I guess it's good that he's even aware that someone outside exists, considering he can barely stand up anymore.
My doggo hates bike riders and little children pushing bicycles by. And I was like, he just gets an attitude suddenly with someone getting by the house.
This is a mailman bark for sure.
Okay.
But all right. Yeah, it does seem like it would be a bit redundant just in terms of Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. You already have 2 kind of rail thin speedster receivers. And I don't know how you could possibly get all 3 of them on the field at the same time, which maybe that's not your concern. Maybe this is the long-term development play and you're not really worried about that right now. But from a fit perspective, I feel like you do need to kind of accumulate different types of receivers. And that would not be an example of this. That said, he's a very talented receiver. And if they have a good grade on him and they really like him, and Tennessee is a school that they're very clearly very comfortable with from a development perspective, then yeah, I could see it happening.
Yeah, we are Ohio State and Tennessee alum central.
Yeah, and they've lost 2 of their Tennessee Vols, so they need to kind of rebuild that.
Yes, restock the bin.
Yeah, and that's obviously Shai Tuttle and Marquez Callaway. Austin Klaska again I'm trying to figure out what his avatar is. Is it like a grasshopper? I believe it's a grasshopper. Maybe a cricket of some kind. Anyway, who is someone you guys hope to see breaking out this season, hoping for Peyton Turner to get his act together? I mean, so I think you answered your own question. If the question is hope, like if the question is who do I hope breaks out, then of course it's Peyton Turner. I can't think of any other player that would even remotely fit that mold of like someone who has underperformed to this point in his career and can be that breakout player, right? Like you can say go ahead.
Can we get a breakout year in health from Andrus Peat?
Yeah, I don't think that's how that works.
Oh, okay.
Plus, I wouldn't even like the problem with offensive linemen is like, what does a breakout look like? You don't notice them, you know? Like Cesar Ruiz, yeah. Cesar Ruiz had a breakout last year, so I guess you could consider that.
Yeah,
Trevor
true.
Penning is an answer, but he didn't really play last year, and when he played, he was good.
Yeah, it's more of health for him. Obviously, you don't want the breakout. You just please stay on the field.
I don't even know what I would consider a breakout from him is my point, because he hasn't played enough for me to have any baseline. Like you have to have a baseline before you can break out, and he doesn't have one yet. So I want to see him develop, but I'm not going to say breakout. So when you say hope, obviously that's Peyton Turner, right? If I say expect,
Yeah, gotta be. I totally agree. It has to be Turner.
If you're asking who I expect to break out this year and who didn't really do much last year, Andrew Dowell. We talked about this on last episode. I think that as you kind of go through the linebacker room and you try to figure out who can contribute more than they have, he is a guy who should be at the top of that list. Obviously, he's going to be primarily a special teams contributor. But barring a high-value draft pick spent at the position, he is probably your number 4 linebacker right now. And he's going to have to be depth somewhere, unless, again, like you bring in a veteran or you bring in a draft pick that's going to sit in there. DeMarco Jackson's another example of a guy who could rotate in. But again, I don't have a baseline for him to have any idea of what would be a breakout. He didn't play a snap. He ended his season in the preseason. So I think if I expect to see, if the question is, who do you expect to show up this year in a way that did not happen last year, despite them being on the roster all season long, that would be Andrew Dowell.
I'm going to go with Malcolm Roach just because of that defensive tackle position. is kind of lacking right now. We got some new pieces. Yes, they brought in free agency, but Malcolm's a guy we know who's been around, entering year 4 with the team, and could be in line for just more snaps, more production, and interested to see what he's able to do with that commitment now, even more from the team. And is a guy that has that heart for the black and gold, which is huge as well.
Yeah, my only issue with that one is I feel like he had a solid year. Like,
yeah.
So I'm not sure what a breakout would be for him.
A sack?
In that yeah, a couple sacks, right? In that he's going to be kind of behind Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard in that rotation. So, maybe I think it's a good pick. But I'm not sure what a breakout would be exactly.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I do think that he has to contribute more this year than he did last year, for sure. Here's Austin again. Speaking of training camp, I wonder what Emmanuel Butler is up to. That's a good question.
I believe it's the CFL, right?
Is it?
Yeah, I think he's the Canadian Football League. I never heard from him in the XFL or any of the other leagues, but I thought I remembered him going up to Canada and playing ball. But man, exactly. You talk about training camp. He was airline drive Pro Bowl ready.
Yeah, he's a guy who I do feel he doesn't have a Wikipedia page.
Oh no.
I can't even I Google him, there's nothing. He's fell off the face of the earth. I hope he's okay.
An enigma.
That was one of the first training camps I went out to when I started covering the Saints. And I didn't go to all the practices, but I do remember everyone went nuts about him. And he looked real good. He just never, I think they brought him back for the next training camp, but he didn't make it through it. And he is really a fascinating example of the preseason hype train getting a little out of control.
Yeah, my very first training camp and my first interview with a player was actually AA Adrian Arrington, another wide receiver name. Yeah, it's like, what happened to that guy?
Yeah. But I mean, Emmanuel is a special case because not only did he not make the roster or make the practice squad, where is he? Where'd he go?
Yeah, I just went to, I'm guessing, it's One Butler, his Instagram page, and there's no 55 weeks ago was his last post. It's like him shirtless in the desert.
Yeah, so I see him. He has a CFL page.
Oh, okay.
It says he has 3 receptions for 30 yards.
Oof.
But it doesn't say a team. It doesn't say anything. I don't understand it. Where did he go?
Yeah, anyway. a little bit odd when you saw the
Very
USFL and XFL leagues popping up, and we've heard nothing from him.
There's plenty of opportunity at this point.
Right.
There's more opportunity than ever for a player who can't make the NFL to be able to at least showcase his abilities on TV. And he just, you have to wonder if, he went to Northern Arizona. He's from Arizona. You have to wonder if, there's a mental element to this of did he want to do the work? Did he want to be an NFL player? And the answer, it might sound obvious, but it's not a yes for everybody. Sometimes it's it's a lot of work. It's a big commitment. Kiko Alonso this year, he signed with the Saints for one day. He went to one training camp practice. And
he said, forget this.
Well, and everyone was like, oh, he must have been hurt. His health must have been bad. He's like, no, he sat in one meeting and he was like, I can't commit to this. This is too much.
Yeah.
And he
just can't do this anymore.
And that's a thing that happens, right? That's not unique to Kiko. The willingness to do the work is a much bigger element of making it in the NFL than I think a lot of people realize.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, that it's not just you show up. Maybe some guys,
some people do show up.
Right, there are some.
Like a guy like Jadeveon Clowney, I've always felt like he can just show up and be a effective NFL player. But he's a guy who had the natural ability to be a Hall of Fame player. And instead, he's a fringe Pro Bowler, right? That kid could have rolled out of bed and been a double-digit sack guy. Instead, he's just a guy that is floating around from team to team to team because I don't think he's willing to do the work. And anyway.
But you know what? Because that talent is there is why he still gets a job. That's what's crazy.
Well, right. Like he is that talented, and that's why it's kind of wild. Clarence Matthews, we can go best player available in the first round and go hooker, all caps, in the second. And the green wave, I assume you mean Tajay Spears, the running back, in the third. Also, Steve, I love your hat. What's going on with that hat? Is it a Super Bowl hat?
Yeah, that's the old Super Bowl hat.
Nice.
Found that one today and put it on.
Nice. Still clean.
Yeah, not doing too bad.
That's my problem. Like I mentioned, I sweat a lot when I have a white hat like that. Over the course of years, like if I went into my closet and I brought out like some old golf hats, you would just have this kind of like wavy, like discolored line from the sweat.
That definitely happens during training camp.
That's why I wear black hats.
Yes.
Probably noticed this. I wear a lot of dark colored hats. There's a reason. But no, yeah, I agree with this to some extent of like, I think you are definitely going best player available in the first round. I think you're also going best player available in the second round. But what you say here is they could go hooker in the second round. He might be the best player available, right? I don't think you're saying, okay, best player available, then quarterback, then running back. Like that's not how the Saints are going to approach this. But you know, like they might really like Hendon Hooker and go after him.
You know, maybe later on in the draft, I wouldn't say third round, but the Tulane linebacker for sure could be a guy that this team needs for depth, as well as obviously, you know, the hype around Tajay Spears has been great, but you know, the that linebacker spot's something we've talked about too, which would be really interesting.
Dorian Williams is the Tulane linebacker that you were referencing. One thing that we didn't talk about in the last week's episode, which we should have because we talked so much about the top 30 visits, is so you get 30 of them, obviously, as the name suggests. One caveat that is relevant, especially if you are someone who's hoping the Saints might draft Tajay Spears or Dorian Williams, schools that are within 50 miles of an NFL facility can visit without it counting toward the top 30 visit limit, right? So any Tulane player can go and visit the Saints without that. So like it's almost like if they haven't visited them already for a private workout, it's almost inevitable that they will, because it would just be a waste of time, a waste of an opportunity not to. But you might not see their name crop up in so and so has scheduled a top 30 visit with the Saints because it doesn't have to be official. The only other school that's on the fringe of that, and I do need to figure out how they do this, is Southeastern Louisiana.
Okay.
And it might not matter because there's not a lot of NFL players coming out of Southeastern. But so if you did like a Google Maps directions from the Saints facility to Southeastern Louisiana, it's 53 miles. So it's technically outside of it. But if you look at the map, it's only 53 miles because there's a giant lake in between the Saints and Southeastern. And if you took a helicopter ride there, it's under 50 miles. So I am curious how they establish the mileage. Is it mileage by car or is it just straight line distance?
Well, since it's involving the Saints, it says 53. It's out of range. No good.
I just think it's funny because like most, I don't know if they were thinking about the Lake Pontchartrain when they were coming up with this 50-mile limit, but it is interesting. Either way, they have a locals day workout where they have everyone come in. It's basically a pro day. So it's not really, I don't think it's ever going to be an issue, but it's just kind of a funny thing. But yeah, all that said, if you were like freaking out because Tajay Spears isn't on this list of top 30 visits, keep in mind, he doesn't have to be.
Right, because it's like, oh man, they need a running back. What are they doing?
Yeah.
That's a good little nugget though, because I had no idea about that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting for like certain teams. Like if you are really close to like these big time colleges, that's an inherent advantage. But LSU is not in that, and it almost makes you wonder, like maybe that's part of the reason that they haven't drafted many LSU players. Because if they were within 50 miles and you had them come, like all of them come in for private workouts, like Jaquelin Roy, the Saints are having come in this year. But you have to wonder if like maybe in previous years, if they could have just had them without having to worry about that they would have got more. Robert Campbell says Jalen will not be there in the fourth round. I'm not sure who he's referring to. Jalen who? Oh, Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt. Okay. He spelled it. It's spelled slightly differently. That's why I couldn't figure it out. It's Jalin, but that's what he's talking about. Yeah, that's fair. He might not be, but who knows? There's so much variability with the wide receivers. Austin says yes, it is a grasshopper.
And trying to figure out. I mean, I think we can get maybe a sort of good idea of what could be around at pick 29, maybe. But yeah, guessing what's going to be around in the fourth round is quote unquote crapshoot or anybody's guess. You could say there's just no way you might be able to guess lucky, be lucky kind of thing. But man, the draft is just so tough, obviously, too, because we can't even factor in trades that are going to go on draft night.
Yeah, and I also think from getting from the third to the fourth round is particularly difficult to gauge because of all the comp picks. And I think what happens when a team gets one or two comp picks in the third round is it's almost like a free swing, right? Like it's like this wasn't even your pick. You just got it.
Right.
And so it's like if you were kind of questioning it with your real third round pick, maybe it's like, why not? What's the worst that happens? Let's go for it. And so you might see some guys picked there that might be ahead of where they might be going otherwise. Anyway, I think that's definitely something to think about when you get into those comp picks at the end of the third round. Where was it? I don't know if it's DA. Maybe he's a big Dennis Allen fan, but I think it's more Data Saints #1. Dada? I don't know. He says he agrees with me. The Saints, he wants to see the Saints stay at number 29 and let the board shape itself out. I really just want to see the Saints start collecting future assets. Like I'm so tired of operating at a deficit every year. And, like I'm very vocal that I don't have an issue with how the Saints operate from a cap perspective. I like the way they do it. I think they maximize their resources in a way that is unique and helpful in terms of staying competitive. But where that doesn't marry with, and this is the part that I think when you're going to criticize it, this is where you could actually make some ground, is if you're going to act that way, if you're going to prioritize it that way, you need value players, value contracts in these third, fourth, fifth round picks to fill out your roster so that you're not constantly having to go in for these kind of middle contracts in free agency to fill gaps. And that's where you haven't been drafting players. You've been trading them every year. And I just want to see them come out with like 2 or 3 extra fourth round picks in the next couple drafts so that when you're going into the draft, you already have it. You don't have to worry about it. And that's where if you're constantly trading up, those are the picks that you're giving away. And I think that's where I lose it a little bit, is you have to pick one of those things. You can't constantly be taking dead money hits and then also be sacrificing your ability to have players on rookie contracts. So I agree that I think I'd like to see them stay put in the first round.
Yeah. And to me, like I said earlier, I would love the idea of, moving down a little to accumulate maybe even more of those draft assets, but I can't even think of a time this team has honestly ever done that, Jeff.
What, stay put?
Move down to.
Oh yeah, they haven't done it since like 2007. There's like a crazy, like they have not. They just, it's just not how they operate. And I think this team very much values its own analysis. And when it lands on a player that it wants to draft, they would much rather go get that player than settle for someone that they're not confident in. And I appreciate that. I think it's the way you should go about drafting, but there's a limit, right? Like there is a point where just getting more darts up on the board, like you can say you don't want to throw darts, but if you know that you're going to hit the board and it's just a question of what you hit, then the dart throwing method is not an issue. It's only an issue if you can't even see it. If you close your eyes and throw a dart at the board, then yeah, that's a bad idea. But if you can see the board and you're aiming for a bullseye and maybe you hit an 18, then yeah, throwing an extra dart helped you. Anyway, I think that the approach needs to be slightly different.
I just think the inevitable is going to be, though, they end up trading up.
I know that's what I'm hoping. Mickey's listening to this podcast, even though I know he's not. All right. Randy Savage, Macho Man Randy Savage here.
Yeah.
I kind of mixed Randy Savage with Kermit there. O-line, D-line, keep Carr clean, and he will produce with what they already have and put opposing quarterbacks on their heels. Let's go. Who dat? Oh, yeah. Okay. I get it. Yeah. I think when you look at the Saints, that is very much a clear trend that they built through the lines in the draft, right? You look at Look at where the first round picks have gone. Look, if you look at the first round picks currently on the roster, a vast majority of them are on the offensive and defensive lines.
Definitely.
Cam Jordan.
Heavy investments, in the trenches, obviously.
Right. Marcus Davenport left. He was a first round pick. Cam Jordan, Peyton Turner. Is there another one? No, because Marcus left. And the defensive tackles are all new. So Cam Jordan, Peyton Turner, Andres Pete, Trevor Penning, Ryan Ramczyk, Cesar Ruiz, right? So that's 8 of them. You have 10 offensive linemen or 10 linemen on the field at any given time. 8 of them are first-round picks, and one of them is Eric McCoy, who was a second-round pick, but he was your first pick of that draft. So effectively, the same principle. So, it's.
I was going to hit you with now quick quiz. How many were Senior Bowl?
Well, all of the defensive linemen were, except for Malcolm Roach. I don't know about. So Eric McCoy was.
Penning was.
Cesar Ruiz, I don't believe was.
I'm not sure about Pete.
I don't think so. Anyway, most of them. All right, a couple more, and then we'll move on and close this out. Yeah, Austin points out Eric McCoy, so 9 of them. Well, yeah, but he was not a first-round pick. Anyway. One more from Austin, who's, like I said, always active. This little grasshopper just chirping away. That reminds me. I've seen a lot of college running backs visit the Saints. I think that's very telling. It's a pretty good class. It is a good class. That's why Steve having them pick Bijan Robinson in the first round is absolute nonsense. The question isn't going to be whether they look at running backs. It's going to be where they value running backs in this class. And I think 4th round, 5th round is where you're going to start to see it. Maybe 3rd round if you really fall in love with a guy. It's where you took Alvin Kamara, right? I think you traded up early in the 3rd round to get him. And it's really just a question of who they really like. I think Kendry Miller at a TCU is really interesting. He's a guy they've had in for a top 30 visit. You're going to go from there. Dwayne McBride at UAB. I'm sure the Saints got a lot of good looks at him. Obviously, he's playing in the Gulf South. They've had every opportunity to go watch him play. They played LSU this year. He did get shut down by LSU, but they were obviously, if they wanted to go see him, they could. So I think he's intriguing. I don't think he's getting as much pre-draft buzz as probably deserves.
Yeah, I blame the whole draft, the simulation for giving me Bijan with that number 29 pick. I couldn't pass up on.
You had no say in the matter.
I still would pick him. I think
Steve doesn't make his own decision.
I just don't like the rest of my picks after him. Honestly,
Steve is blaming Pro Football Focus,
who now I can't even access the rest of their simulation.
If Pro Football Focus jumped off a bridge, would you do it, Steve?
What they said, Jeff.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, I think we've run through most of these questions. If we missed you, I apologize. I think we got most of them. We got a couple congratulations in there. I say we, I mean me. Thank you for that. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, just Mr. Lucky, you can call him the last. I guess he's been on a heater, as they say.
I won our bracket. I won a drawing at work for a nice little chunk of change.
And you're getting married.
And I upgraded my hotel room in Las Vegas.
Hey, that's always a bonus too.
Yeah, they saw me coming miles away. They sent me an email this morning like, you should upgrade your room for X amount of dollars per night. And I was like, okay. Yeah, good stuff.
Absolutely, man. Do it. Enjoy it. To the fullest. Everything.
I can't remember the last time I had a week off from work. And I will not be working.
Just keep that laptop at home.
No, I'm going to take it with me. I can't. I was thinking about that. Like, I physically cannot not have a laptop with me. And it's not even about like working. It's just about like, what if I need to do something on the laptop? All right.
If you do that, your soon-to-be bride will probably kill you.
No, she'll have her own laptop. Are you kidding me? She's the one who's more likely to work. She's way more likely to work on this vacation than I am. So,
don't be the guy that does that, and I wouldn't expect you to. Obviously.
But she actually has an important job, so like it's hard for me to be mad about it. I literally just talk about sports. Like if like I was like, oh God, I have to do this. She's like, really? Do you? What's the worst that happens?
Oh, you froze. Oh, now you're back.
I'm back. You froze. Anyway,
We're
all right,
freezing everywhere.
Let's wrap this thing up before both computers actually get encased in blocks of ice. This is Inside Black and Gold. Thanks, everyone, for hopping in. We haven't been able to do one of these live chats in a while, so I'm glad we were able to get one in today. If you want to check out the rest of this episode, if you're watching on YouTube and you want to check out the rest of this episode, go check out the podcast tomorrow morning when it posts. We'll have an interview with Eric Eager, and we'll also have clips from Archie Manning talking about Derek Carr, and even a national sports show that actually seems to like the Saints, which is like the most rare thing you can ever find.
Positive Saints news, yeah.
All right, y'all. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do that. And thanks for listening. As always, y'all are the best. Peace.
Later.